years. And what we've designed is a new white lighting and continuous disinfection for a variety of problematic environments in the patient care area, as well as reducing costs associated with the illnesses that occur from the germs that are constantly around us. So a little bit of relevant background is really the increasing public health challenge associated with a lot of the growing resistant germs that we are surrounding us at all times right now. And when you hear coughing in the back of the room is actually sending germs throughout this room we're all in right now, not to terrify anybody, but our product is relevant to this topic. So one of the largest factors that is associated with these challenges is the speed and ease that germs can travel throughout a healthcare facility and their ever-growing resistance. The World Health Organization has cited this on par with climate change, and one of the largest threats of the 21st century to us is the antibiotic resistance of these germs. Pair that in with the fact that our current tools in our arsenal are usually intermittent and harmful to be used around people. You can see why we have a lot of challenges with these germs. So what this really causes is what's defined as environmental contamination. You can see in one of the images there, we have these germs that are surviving on all things that we're touching every day: door handles, sink handles, bedside tables. And then we have people interacting with those environments. And you can see in that black light image there, we're constantly transmitting those germs throughout any type of facility. It could be as much as your home or somewhere like an operating room. And there are a variety of consequences associated with these contaminations. Adding some confounding factors to this is that these germs, particularly pathogenic germs, can last anywhere from days to weeks to months on any types of surfaces. A particular study was done where they had collected samples on over 100,000 different surfaces, anywhere ranging from an ambulance to an operating room. And unfortunately, with the current cleaning procedures that are out there, so think chemical cleaning or soap and water, they're getting about 32% of what's on those surfaces. So the other 68% is living for days, weeks, months, and we can't see them with the human eye. So there's no surprise that there are a lot of widespread challenges out there in places even outside of healthcare facilities. In the last 12 months, we've had contamination in food processing, like ice cream and chicken processing. We've had compound pharmacy outbreaks, endoscopy center outbreaks in UCLA and Cedars-Sinai. We've had career-ending NFL athletes get MRSA infections in their locker rooms that also result in tens of millions of dollars worth of lawsuits. So this isn't just something that is encompassed in particular healthcare facilities. It's a real general public health challenge. Healthcare-acquired infections, of course, being the most dramatic of this case. It is the leading cause of patient death in the United States. I think every single presentation today has talked about the rising healthcare costs. This is a huge factor of them and takes into play a number of different factors, but adding between $35 and $45 billion every single year to the healthcare system. So, of course, everyone would agree that we would all rather go into a healthcare facility and get better as opposed to worse, which I actually learned myself when my grandmother contracted a MRSA infection. I naively thought at age 20 that everyone does get better, and unfortunately, 1 out of 20 at the time, that's not the case. But for the healthcare provider themselves, they have a real economic imperative to reduce these costs. The first reason being the reputation of hospitals is now increasingly transparent. We can all go on Consumer Reports right now and take a look at all of the infection rates that are in the capital region and choose our provider based on that. There's also the cost of readmission. These are considered preventable illnesses, and so the hospital does not get to bill for any of these infections, whether they happen in the hospital or if they're readmitted with an infection in a period of time. And then with the Affordable Care Act, there's also new regulations employing penalties on hospitals that they're getting their full Medicare reimbursement reduced by certain percentages because of these infections. And of course, the worst case of litigation. So there really is an imperative right now to be on the top of the mind of everyone in the C-suite at a hospital. So the next important question is, okay, well, what are we doing about this? It's clearly an issue that we haven't been able to curb. What's happening now is really there's an emergence of new types of remediation technologies, and they're quite severe. 3 of the examples up there are examples of chemical bombing systems or pulsed ultraviolet systems. Almost every hospital in the capital region, not all of them, but almost all of them, are employing a system like this to clean the patient rooms there. They're incredibly onerous. They do shut down the room for a period of time because, again, they're harmful to be used around people. So this is where our team really saw an opportunity to look at the limitations of these technologies and say, what's the biggest missing factor here? And the really big missing factor is the continuous aspect of cleaning. When you have a patient in a room for 10 days, for example, these systems are sitting in a closet. And there's redeposition of bioburden during the course of that stay, and then of course the patient's getting the infection when they're interacting with the environment. So what's a way that we could potentially provide a continuous solution to reduce this bioburden? So what's really interesting is now with a little bit of knowledge of microbiology, we can now talk about the evolution of the lighting industry, which I find is sort of a fascinating convergence of what we do with our technology. So very briefly, probably all familiar with UVC, if you've seen it or heard of it in air filtration, water filtration. It's been around for a number of decades, and it's used through a mercury bulb, where they can emit UVC. It's great at degrading DNA, and it's very germicidal. Well, that was all the only way we had lighting to kill germs previously. Now with the advent and commercialization of LEDs, for which when I entered college could not buy in Home Depot commercially an LED, now we can actually more precisely tune areas of the spectrum in the visible light spectrum, as we all sort of know as the Roy G. Biv area of the spectrum. We can now more precisely tune areas that can target things that are in germs that are not in people. So a quick background here on light-emitting diodes, which is the core base technology of what allows us to do what we do, and how those spectrums differ. So we're all familiar with incandescent and fluorescent bulbs. Well, the way that those work to excite gas is that they actually emit quite an erratic spectrum, but it appears white to the human eye. However, with LEDs, they're semiconductor-based, so we can now much more precisely tune anywhere in the spectrum we'd like with a narrow bandwidth. So we actually utilize that to take an area of the spectrum in the blue-violet area to target molecules that are only in these germs that I've talked about that are not actually in our human cells. So it works very differently than UVC. So what our team has done is really taken this core concept and law of nature that with a visible light spectrum we can actually kill germs, and we've designed a white light spectrum around that. So it's a little more complicated if you think than kindergarten finger paint. We do have a lot of colorimetry that goes into the design using 5 different areas of spectrum to create a white light that with a flip of a switch you can actually be continuously disinfecting any of these types of environments. So we have installations, I'll get to that in a minute, including some in the capital region where we've installed their overhead lighting. Some actually, if you look behind you, it's an example of a 2x2 fixture and a drop ceiling. We replace those to continuously disinfect. So that's really where the core premise of what we do is that it can be continuous, and it's actually one of the only systems out there that's safe to be used around people. We also get a lot of the benefits of using LED lights. We are having increase in length of life of the LEDs, so you get lighting improvements as well. So to give you a little bit of a visual of what we're able to do in a room environment is actually the top row there is an example of if someone were to cough or shed in any environment. So it could be a waiting room, it could be your home bathroom. You're seeing exponential growth of these germs over the course of a day. Now we can see it here because it's in growth media, but typically you wouldn't be able to see that on any of those environments. And what we've shown, that's with your standard fluorescent lighting. With our installation, we've obviously been able to show a significant knockdown in that growth of those germs. So again, the biggest question is safety, and it may come up. We do have all of our international safety certifications for the product, showing it's actually in an exempt risk group for safety, again, because what we're targeting is very unique to these germs that we do not contain. And these systems right now can actually retrofit into any standard drop ceiling that you have. So we have a variety of different customers, even outside of healthcare, and I'll touch on that. One of the interesting comparisons, if you can see it pretty well here up on the screen, is we get advantages on what's called color rendering as well with LED lighting. So I don't know if you've all experienced sort of that dingy type of fluorescent lighting in some office settings. It's not quite pleasing to the eye, and some are worse than others. But what we can do, because we have distinct areas of the spectrum, is actually get higher color rendering. So colors actually look a lot better as well under our lighting. So a lot of advantages that we're seeing with LEDs in addition to the disinfection component. So we've really brought the product to market as of this year, as of very early this year, and we've been working with a number of research organizations. All the testing we've done has been completely third party. We're heavily funded by NYSERDA, based out of Albany here. We have a number of great studies ongoing with some thought leaders around the country showing the efficacy of the product. We do have a publication from Mount Sinai Medical Center, actually, who's a great partner of ours, where in an HIV clinic, for example, we showed reductions on all surfaces morning and evening. Even though there were hundreds of patients in that HIV clinic over the course of a week, just with retrofit of that lighting. So this gives us a lot of opportunities in the future, and our team is certainly looking there, where we've gotten to a point where we've actually miniaturized the technology, because the only challenges of germs is not just in a commercial setting where you have drop ceilings. So we can actually look to offer in the future, and our core technology is there right now to replace in homes, for example, in consumer screw-in light bulbs. So you may be able to place one in your shower to prevent mold growth, for example, above kitchen sinks. We're in talks with some airline lighting suppliers for airline bathrooms, for example, where we can implement our diodes to disinfect those areas. So we're afforded a lot of flexibility using LEDs as well as the software associated with the systems that we use. So lastly, this is a quick snapshot of actually some of the customers that are already in our customer base or we are focusing on. And of course, each of these face their own challenges. I touched on some of them earlier. So we provide sort of a different value proposition for a number of them. Some of our clients actually are just particularly interested in marketing a cleaner environment. So we offer things like this as well. If you think about a pediatric waiting room, which I think certainly terrifies a lot of people, an airline bathroom, all of these things can benefit from marketing the fact that this facility has actually taken the initiative to put in higher quality procedures. That's also an effort for HCAP scores. There's quality questions associated with the cleanliness as well. So we do have a number of clients that are primarily interested in the marketing aspects. And these are the types of places that we're talking with. And throughout next year, we're looking at actually announcing a large Fortune 500 distributorship, US and global separately, but to really expand the technology now that we've gotten to a good base of our revenue of customers in these different types of facilities. Lastly, this is our team. We're up to about 10 people right now. We have a great team of core engineers. Our core team was biomedical, mechanical, and electrical and computer systems engineers for about 2 years while we were developing the technology. We now have a production department, sales, and we have a great base of advisors anywhere from lighting to healthcare. And we're excited to continue to grow. We have a big year next year. Just this week, we're moving brand new offices, which is a little bit hectic, about double the size, but we're excited about that. So thanks for your time. I hope you've learned a little bit about what we do, and maybe I changed the way you think about clean a little bit today. Thanks.
For questions?
Questions. One particular wavelength are you using for disinfection? And second, are they guys your competitors or you're partnering? How does it work?
Actually working in the 400 to 420 to target the specific porphyrin molecule, the spectrum. And in terms of Crystal IS, they are actually not competitors of ours. We're working in very different spaces. So what they're focusing on those LEDs more efficient so that they can emit the 254 nanometers out of LEDs, which is a huge advancement because then you can use them in different types of environments. The biggest challenge right now is still be harmful to be used around people. Thanks.
Thanks. Colleen, thanks for the pitch. As you think about your next steps.
For us right now, we have a couple different fronts that we're looking to grow the business. Customer base in a variety of different markets, position outside of healthcare, in places anywhere you could imagine that needs a cleaner environment. We're interested in talking to the early adopter edge in these markets that would be willing to implement in a room. So it's a relatively small investment. But for us, of course, we're fundraising right now to next year. And any other general advice, we're a relatively young company and connections.
Have you considered the worst case scenario of the organization?
Key question. We wouldn't be doing much help if the germs were evolving to our lighting as well. So there's a couple different ways to look at that question. The first one being basically what we're doing is we're targeting a building, and it's very inherent to that matrix. So they would have to actually no longer contain that. What it does is it activates that molecule over time, creating too much reactive oxygen. They would have to be missing that crucial building block for that to happen. Sort of the technical thing on this mechanism. There are ways to determine that. You do 10 different dosages of a disinfectant in this scenario. Good question. Thanks.
I think we have time for one more.
On that gentleman's question, if I was to talk to someone who are providing any kind of incentives for early adopters as well as...
Sure, so in some sense, yes, in the sense that they fund, so we do have some funding to fund demonstration, sort of very different than the pond side that we work with. So now just the wattage, and we are somewhat of a higher wattage, so there's not a direct incentive program, but we do have some funding on the grant.
Have you thought about the air rooms?
Absolutely. I mean, the approach we've taken is really we've been able to miniaturize the technology now with a single diode can actually emit our spectrum now. So we're approaching and are in discussions with the people that make all of the cabins where we can supply, just so involving people like Boeing and Hubble Lighting, and we're in those discussions right now.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you.